Hey folks, this is Kalani. We may have a super special surprise this week. Patch 10.2.6 might go live this very next reset. We don't have any confirmation just yet, but there are some interesting hints that we're going to go over in this week's video. There are also some huge class changes, buffs and nerfs coming through for retail servers, which we haven't seen in quite a while, so that's exciting. And then the Cataclysm beta also started up this week. There's a lot to talk about, so let's break it all down. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with the class changes this week because it's been quite a while since we've seen any balance tuning changes for retail. To start with, Resto Druids will see a 12% increase to Rejuvenation's healing, which is quite significant when you consider how often they use that ability. Preservation Evoker will see a handful of changes to try and help them see some more playtime. Time of Need's clone overall healing has been increased by 100%, so a huge buff right there, and Time of Need clone's living flame healing was also bumped up by 16%. Lifegiver's Flame will heal for 40 and 80% of damage done, up from 35 and 70%, Inherent Resistance was doubled up to a 4 and 8% magic damage reduction buff, up from 2 and 4%, and then Attuned to the Dream increases healing done and received by 3 and 6%, up from 2 and 4%. So a lot of healing buffs and some defensive buffs thrown in for good measure to help Preservation Evokers stay alive while dashing around the battlefield. Hunters made the list this week, but it's nothing too exciting, I'm afraid. There is a 3% buff to all damage and pet damage for marksmanship, and the same 3% buff to all damage and pet damage for survival. Hopefully they'll get more specific tuning sometime soon. Frost Mages will also see some buffs this week. Flurry damage has been increased by 25%, Water Bolt and Water Jet damage from your Elemental will be increased by 25%, Frostball damage is also up 10%, and then Ice Lance damage has been increased by 5%. So some sizable buffs for the main damage components of a Frost Mage's kit. Mistweaver Monks have a bit of back and forth this week. All of their healing is going to be reduced by 6%, which definitely isn't ideal, but then they're going to see a 6% buff to Shaylin's Gift, Jadefire Stomp, and Expel Harm. So I guess those abilities will just kind of stay the same, but everything else will see that 6% reduction. Subtlety Rogues are the only spec to receive just nerfs this week by the looks of things. Eviscerate damage has been reduced by 6%, but that will not apply to PvP combat. It definitely could have been worse. And then we round things out with a quick 3% damage buff for Elemental Shaman, so quite a lot of buffs this week with a handful of nerfs for some overperforming specs as well. That's it for the general class changes, but we have quite a few PvP specific changes to go over as well, including some long anticipated nerfs for Havoc Demon Hunter, so let's start with them. Demon Hide physical damage reduction was reduced down to 3% from 5%, Scars of Suffering versatility bonus was knocked down to 2% from 4%, so that talent got slashed in half. Illidari Knowledge magic damage reduction was also reduced down to 3% from 5%, and then Will of the Illidari talent's max health bonus was reduced down to 3% from 5%. So less versatility, less physical damage reduction, less magic damage reduction, and less health. It looks like Havoc is going to be quite a bit squishier with these changes in place. Then we also have nerfs to Essence Break, reducing the damage bonus down to 40% from 50%, and there was a bug fix to ensure Throw Glaive isn't doing too much damage in PvP. Druids also made the list of PvP changes. Adaptive Swarm can no longer be cast during the preparation period of arenas or battlegrounds, and there was a bug fix for Well-Honed Instincts. Frenzied Regen is no longer reduced for Feral or Balanced Druids in PvP, but Resto is going to stay at that 50% reduction during PvP combat. Wild Attunement no longer activates when Cyclone is cast on an immune target, and then Resto has some bug fixes as well. Hunters have a couple of PvP changes too. Killshot damage will be increased by 25%, up from 10% for Beast Mastery Hunters, and then Survival will also get a 5% damage boost to both Raptor Strike and Mongoose Bite when they were previously reduced by 11%. So that's going to be quite a big buff for those abilities and their damage in PvP specifically. For the mages, Ring of Fire now deals 18% of the target's health over 6 seconds, down from 24%, so 6% less over the duration. For Arcane, Prismatic Barrier reduces magic damage taken by 10% down from 15% and reduces the duration of incoming effects by 15% down from 25%, so magic effects are going to be a bit stronger against arcane mages after these changes go into effect. For fire, Fevered Incantation was nerfed down to 1% crit damage per stack from 2% per stack, so that got cut in half. Meteor's damage will be increased by 30% up from 11%. Fireball damage is increased by 35% up from 18%. Scorch will be increased by 300% up from 200%, which is kind of crazy that it's that high already, but it should hit quite a bit harder going forward. Fire Blast damage was reduced down to an 8% bonus, and Living Bomb damage will get an 800% increase up from a previous 440% increase. Crazy numbers, but PvP does play differently, I suppose. That's why classes are tuned for PvP separately from PvE in the first place, but a lot of damage buffs for Fire Mage this week. Mistweaver Monks are going to see some adjustments as well. Vivify Healing will be decreased by 10% instead of 20%, so that's actually a buff right there. Invigorating Mists will be increased by 12%, Soothing Mist is up 15%, and Soothing Mist from your Jade Serpent statue is also going to be up 15%. Holy Paladins are getting some big damage buffs for PvP. Denounce damage will be increased by 70%, Judgment damage is up 50%, and then Greater Judgment Absorb is also been increased by 30%. Disc Priests have some quick changes. Smite damage is up 25%, and Atonement Healing will be increased by 8% in PvP combat. Outlaw Rogues join the fray with a couple of nerfs. Float Like a Butterfly effectiveness is reduced by 50% in PvP combat. Precision Shot damage reduction is now 3% down from 5%, and Take Your Cuts haste bonus is being reduced down to 10% from 15%, and the duration is also being reduced by 2 seconds. Enhancement Charlamans will see a 25% boost to their healing surge. Warlock's Soul Burn Demonic Circle will last for 4 seconds down from 6, and it will increase movement speed by 30% down from 50%, and then the Flame Rift damage for Destro's 4-set bonus will be reduced by 30% in PvP. And then last but not least, we come to the Warriors. Cacophonous Raw damage threshold has been increased by 50% down from 100%, Arms Execute damage will be increased by 25% up from 15%, and Fury Execute damage will be increased by 65% up from 50%. So all in all, quite a lot of class changes for both PvE and PvP. That's all of the changes for this week, but after 10.2.6 launches and we start getting into another PTR cycle for Season 4 and then patch 10.2.7, I would expect class balance and tuning changes to happen a lot more often. So if there is a class you still think needs some extra attention, hopefully you won't have to wait too much longer for more buffs and nerfs to come through. Now, in other news, patch 10.2.6 still doesn't have any solid information about what the patch will contain content-wise besides that new special event, and we still don't have a release date even though it's supposed to launch this month. We don't have too many Tuesdays left in March for this patch to go live, and patch releases usually have a week's notice at the very least, but the dev team are still completely radio silent. But something popped up as we head into the next weekly reset that is quite interesting. On Tuesday, March 12th, there will be an extended maintenance that lasts for 8 hours. That is quite unusual for a typical weekly reset. Maintenance is relatively short these days when it does happen, giving us ample time to play even as we cross over that weekly reset threshold. The main exceptions are when patches go live. That's the only time we really see extended maintenance these days, and depending on the patch, it can last quite a while. 8 hours is a pretty long maintenance, which means something has to be happening on Tuesday. The big question here is what? A lot of folks have immediately jumped to 10.2.6's release, which makes a lot of sense. The entire patch has been kept a secret as part of this experiment, so why not the release date as well? I feel like if the dev team announces a release date, they also then kind of have to give a couple of breadcrumbs of information. In order to keep everything under wraps and make this patch as much of a surprise as possible, they could just drop it on Tuesday and see how everyone reacts. I have seen some folks say this probably won't happen because there's no way the dev team would end a season without any notice, but while Season 4 is a part of patch 10.2.6, it's not going live with 10.2.6. After 10.2.6 goes live, the PTR will open up to test Season 4. That PTR should still be a version of 10.2.6 from what I understand, and the patch should include most of the data for the season, but Season 4 will start sometime after the patch hits live servers. At at least that was the plan as it was explained most recently. So the release date of 10.2.6 and the start of Season 4 actually are not tied at all, which then frees up 10.2.6 to go live pretty much whenever the dev team wants it to. Now, the other less interesting option floating around is that the dev team are preparing the servers for patch 10.2.6, which means it won't release this weekly reset, but probably with the next one around March 19th. This could be just as likely, sadly. There have been some times where we've had extended maintenance periods just before a patch goes live to make sure the servers aren't going to burn to the ground as soon as it is deployed. But if this is the case, we're still at least another week out from seeing what patch 10.2.6 is all about and whether it's worth all this secrecy. Now, something worth pointing out is that with this patch being completely untested publicly, I would expect a longer maintenance than usual, perhaps even extended beyond what the major patches usually see. This patch could break things in unforeseen ways. That's part of the reason for the PTR to exist. So with this patch not having the large-scale testing that most patches get through the PTR, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a very, very long maintenance and a bit of a buggy patch when it actually comes up. So I wouldn't plan to get into the game when the maintenance is scheduled to end, maybe find something else to do on whatever Tuesday this patch does decide to go live. Personally, I hope the patch does go live this Tuesday after the extended maintenance, mainly because I think that'll be really fun. No announcement, just suddenly log in with all new content to dive into. Everything about 10.2.6 has been kept secret, so why not the release date as well? That would definitely be a true secret patch experiment, and I would love to see the community reaction to a surprise patch on reset day. But what do you think? Could this be a stealth patch drop, or do you think the dev team will at least give us a release date for the patch before it goes live? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, moving on, it's not just retail that's moving along the content production line. Classic Cataclysm Beta just started up its testing cycle, which means we're one step closer to that launching for real. If we look at the roadmap for Classic, that also means we should see the next phase of Season of Discovery sometime soon, probably in late March or early April. That's the next thing on our list before we head into Cataclysm pre-patch and launch, and then finally the level 60 phase of Season of Discovery after that. So Classic players have quite a bit of content to look forward to over the next few months. It's interesting to me that the dev team decided to move past Wrath of the Lich King. I think most folks would kind of pin that expansion as the last classic experience of WoW. That's when the story wrapped up the events of the Warcraft 3 games and we moved on to new plot points, and of course the big world revamp changed the game in a way we hadn't seen before, but I guess just staying at Wrath would cause classic era realms to dwindle slowly but surely, so moving on to Cataclysm at least keeps the content flowing for the folks enjoying the old days of WoW, and it gives players who didn't get to experience Cataclysm as current content that option as well. But that's all of the updates we have to talk about this week, so that's it for this video. What do you think of Cataclysm Classic? Is that an expansion you're interested in experiencing again, or maybe for the first time? Do you think the extended maintenance is a stealth drop of patch 10.2.6, or are they just getting servers ready for when the patch goes live later this month? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you'd like to add your name to the end of every video with a special shout out at the start of the next video, you can find links in the description over to Patreon or click the join button just below this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.